They said she was defective. They said a human had no right to refuse an Alpha's claim. But when Alpha Marcus buried Stella Hayes alive beneath the Whispering Woods, he didn't just commit murder, he created a ghost. Because the Alpha King's pup heard her dying screams, and nothing stays buried in the Nightshade lands. This is the story of how a woman who was silenced became the voice of a dynasty, and how the man who buried her learned that some graves don't stay closed. Chapter 1. The Burial. They said she was defective. They said a human had no right to refuse an Alpha's claim. But when Alpha Marcus buried Stella Hayes alive beneath the Whispering Woods, he didn't just commit murder, he created a ghost. Because the Alpha King's pup heard her dying screams, and nothing stays buried in the Nightshade lands. The roots of the ancient trees tore at Stella's arms as Marcus's enforcers dragged her deeper into the Whispering Woods. Her bare feet left trails of blood on the moss-covered ground. She had stopped fighting 3 minutes ago when one of the enforcers backhanded her so hard her vision went white. "Please," she whispered, her voice already hoarse from screaming. "Marcus, please. We grew up together. You knew my parents." Alpha Marcus walked ahead, his broad shoulders tense beneath his leather jacket. He didn't turn around. "Your parents are dead, Stella. They died protecting a pack that never asked for their sacrifice. And you." He finally looked back, his eyes cold as winter steel. "You're the debt they left behind." Stella's mind flashed back to 3 months ago. Her parents' funeral. The pack standing in respectful silence as their bodies were burned on ceremonial pyres. Marcus had approached her afterward, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "You're alone now," he'd said. "But you don't have to be. Become my companion. I'll take care of you." She'd thought he meant protection. Safety. She'd been so stupid. "I won't be your whore," she'd told him 2 weeks later when his companionship became clear. "I'm not property." His face had gone stone cold. "You're human. You're exactly property." Now they stopped at a clearing where ancient tree roots twisted around a stone structure half buried in the earth. A crypt. Older than the pack itself, older than memory. The enforcers threw Stella down onto the damp ground. She scrambled backward until her spine hit stone. "You're defective human trash who dared to deny an Alpha," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The pack doesn't need dead weight. And I don't accept rejection." "Marcus, no." 2 enforcers grabbed her, lifting her bodily despite her thrashing. They threw her into the crypt. She landed hard on ancient stone, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. Above her, the stone lid began to slide into place. "Wait!" Stella screamed, lurching upward. "Please! I'll do anything." "Marcus!" His face appeared in the narrowing gap, backlit by moonlight. "You should have said yes, Stella. Now you'll have eternity to regret it." The lid sealed shut with a grinding finality that stopped her heart. Total darkness swallowed her whole. "No!" Stella threw herself at the stone above, pushing with all her strength. It didn't budge. Her hands found the edges, searching desperately for a gap, a weakness, anything. "Help! Someone help me!" Outside, she heard Marcus's voice, muffled but clear, buried deep. "I want it forgotten." The first shovelful of dirt hit the stone with a sound like thunder. Then another. And another. "Please." Stella's fingers found a hairline crack where the lid met the crypt wall. She dug at it, her nails tearing, skin splitting. I'm alive. I'm still alive. More dirt. The sound growing more distant as they piled earth on top of her grave. She clawed at the stone until her fingers were slick with blood. Her screams turned raw, then hoarse, then broken. The air grew thick and stale. Each breath came harder than the last. Her chest burned. Please, she whimpered into the suffocating darkness, her bloodied hands finally falling, still against the unyielding stone. Someone, anyone, hear me. Her vision filled with stars that weren't there. Her lungs screamed for air that didn't exist. In the absolute darkness, as consciousness began to slip away, Stella's final coherent thought was a prayer cast into the void. Please, don't let me die alone in the dark. Then there was nothing but the weight of the earth pressing down, and the terrible, absolute silence of a grave that had swallowed her whole. Chapter 2. The pup who had miles away from the Whispering Woods. In the obsidian fortress that crowned Nightshade Mountain, a small black wolf pup jolted awake with a silent whimper. Kai's golden eyes opened wide in the darkness of his room, his heart racing from the nightmare that had become routine. The same dream. Always the same. Fire. Screaming. His mother's voice calling his name before the flames took her. He'd been 4 years old then. Now he was 6, and he hadn't spoken a single word since that night. Hadn't shifted back to human form except when absolutely forced. The wolf felt safer. The wolf didn't have to explain why it couldn't sleep, why it flinched at sudden movements, why it spent every night curled in the corner farthest from the door. Kai padded across the cold stone floor on silent paws, slipping through the partially open door. The estate was quiet at this hour. His father would be in his study, drowning in paperwork and whiskey, pretending he wasn't listening for sounds of his son's nightmares. But tonight, something was different. Kai's ears perked forward. He tilted his head, listening to a sound that shouldn't exist. It was distant, muffled, but unmistakable. A voice. A woman's voice. Not words, just a desperate, fading cry that resonated in his chest like a second heartbeat. Help me. The pup's body moved before his mind caught up. He bolted down the corridor, his claws scrabbling on marble floors. Down the grand staircase. Through the main hall. Guards called out in confusion as he shot past them, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The massive front doors stood closed. Kai threw his small body against them, whining urgently until a confused guard pulled them open. Then he was running, sprinting into the forest with a singular focus he hadn't felt since before his mother died. Behind him, an earth-shaking roar split the night. His father had noticed he was gone. Alpha Daemon Nightshade tore through the forest in his massive wolf form, following his son's scent trail with mounting panic. Kai never left the estate. Never. Not since Luna's death. The boy was terrified of the outside world, and now he was running into the woods alone in the dead of night. Kai's trail led deeper into the neutral territory between packs, into a section of old forest where the trees grew twisted and strange. Then suddenly, the pup stopped. Damon skidded to a halt behind his son, shifting immediately to human form. Kai, what are you? The boy was digging. His small paws tore desperately at a mound of freshly turned earth beneath a cluster of gnarled tree roots. Dirt flew in every direction as he whined frantically, digging faster, harder. Kai, stop. There's nothing, Damon began, But then he heard it too. A sound so faint he almost missed it. A whisper of breath. A dying heartbeat. Something buried. Someone buried. Move. Damon's command was gentle but firm. He dropped to his knees and began tearing through the earth with his bare hands, using strength no human could match. Dirt gave way to stone. An ancient crypt, sealed and buried. The sound was louder now. A desperate, rattling gasp for air that wasn't there. Damon's fingers found the edge of the stone lid. He braced himself and pulled with every ounce of supernatural power he possessed. The stone groaned, cracked, then exploded upward in a shower of fragments. The smell hit him first. Blood, sweat, terror, death coming slowly. Inside the crypt lay a young woman, early 20s, with long dark hair matted with dirt and blood. Her fingers were shredded to the bone, fingernails torn away from clawing at stone. Her lips were blue. Her chest barely moved. Damon reached in and pulled her out, cradling her against his bare chest. For a horrible moment, he thought they were too late. Then she gasped. A huge, desperate inhalation that sounded like resurrection itself. Her eyes flew open, wild and unseeing, and she began to thrash weakly in his arms. "You're safe," Damon said firmly, holding her steady but not restraining. "You're out. You're breathing. You're safe." But she wasn't hearing him. Her eyes were glazed, still trapped in the darkness, still suffocating. Kai shifted. It was the first time in 2 years he'd willingly taken human form outside the estate. He stood there, small and naked and trembling, but he reached out one small hand and touched the woman's dirt-streaked cheek. Her wild eyes focused, locked onto his face. Something in his expression, something in the gentleness of his touch, broke through her panic. She stared at the boy who had heard her dying screams. The boy whose small hand was the first kind thing she'd felt in hours. And somehow, impossibly, she stopped fighting. "Please," she whispered, her destroyed voice barely audible. "Don't put me back." Kai's hand stayed on her face. His golden eyes filled with tears he hadn't cried since his mother's funeral. Damon looked between the dying woman and his son who had finally reached out to touch another living soul. Never, Damon promised, though he had no idea who she was or why she'd been buried alive. "I swear it. Never." Chapter 3. The Nightshade Estate. Stella woke to darkness and immediately started screaming. The walls were closing in. She couldn't breathe. The stone was pressing down on her chest, crushing her lungs, stealing her air. Her shredded fingers clawed at fabric instead of stone, but her mind couldn't tell the difference. "Hold her down." A woman's voice, sharp and commanding. "She's going to hurt herself." Hands grabbed her shoulders. Stella fought with the desperate strength of someone still trapped in their grave. "No, let me out. Please." "Damon, I need you to restrain her while I—" "She's terrified, Elena. Look at her eyes. She's not here." A pinch in her arm. Warmth spreading through her veins. The darkness pulled her back under, but this time it felt different. Softer. Like falling into water instead of earth. When consciousness returned, Stella heard voices through the haze. "Who is she?" Deep. Male. Familiar somehow. "I don't know, but look at her fingers, Damon." The woman's voice was gentler now. She was buried alive. She tried to claw her way out. The damage is extensive. I can heal the tissue, but the psychological trauma. Find out who did this. Right now, I'm more concerned about keeping her sedated. She's having severe panic attacks every time she wakes. Her heart can't take much more. 3 days blurred together in a nightmare carousel. Stella would surface just enough to register walls, ceiling, confinement, and the terror would slam into her like a physical force. Each time, the pinch came. The darkness returned. But through it all, one constant remained. A sound outside her door. Whining. Soft and persistent. The sound of something keeping vigil. On the 4th day, Stella woke differently. The drugs had worn off enough that her mind felt clearer, though her body was leaden. The room was still dark, but soft moonlight filtered through gauzy curtains. Not buried. Not trapped. A small weight shifted on the bed beside her. Stella's head turned slowly. A boy sat there, maybe 6 years old, with messy black hair and enormous golden eyes. He was watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but somehow wasn't. "Hi," Stella whispered. Her throat felt like she'd swallowed broken glass. The boy didn't speak. Just watched. Waiting. The door opened, and the man from before entered. He was massive, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made the room feel smaller. Dark hair, storm gray eyes, and a face that looked carved from granite. But when he looked at the boy, something softened. "You're awake," he said to Stella. Not a question. "Where?" Her voice cracked. "Where am I?" "Nightshade territory. My name is Damon Blackwood." "That's my son, Kai. You're safe here." "Safe." The word felt foreign. "Who buried you?" Damon's voice was carefully controlled, but Stella heard the rage underneath. Tears burned her eyes. "Alpha Marcus. Silvermoon Pack. I'm just human. Worthless. I refuse to." She couldn't finish. Couldn't say what Marcus had wanted from her. Damon's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. "You're not worthless. And you're not going back." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Stay. Heal. We'll discuss the rest later." He turned to leave, but Kai didn't move. The boy reached out slowly, carefully, and took Stella's bandaged hand in his small one. He squeezed gently. Damon froze in the doorway, staring at his son. At the first physical affection the boy had shown anyone in 2 years. Stella looked down at the small hand holding hers and felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking. Opening. "Thank you," she whispered to the boy who had heard her dying screams. "Thank you for finding me." Kai didn't speak, but his hand tightened around hers and he didn't let go. Chapter 4. Breaking Through the Darkness. 3 weeks after waking in the Nightshade estate, Stella still couldn't sleep in a room with the door closed. She kept every window open, even when the mountain air cut cold through the night. Elena said it was normal. That trauma rewired the brain in ways medicine couldn't fix. Normal didn't make the nightmares stop. She'd wake gasping, clawing at blankets that felt like stone, and find Kai already there. The boy had taken to sleeping in wolf form outside her door, and somehow he always knew when the darkness was pulling her under. He'd shift to human, climb onto her bed, and press his small hand to her chest until her breathing slowed. He never spoke. But he didn't need to. During the days, they were inseparable. Stella discovered that small enclosed spaces sent her into spiraling panic, so they stayed in the open areas. The great hall with its vaulted ceilings. The library with its floor-to-ceiling windows. The sprawling gardens that seemed to stretch forever. One afternoon, she brought colored pencils and paper to the garden gazebo. "Can I show you something?" she asked Kai. The boy nodded, settling cross-legged beside her. "When I was little and something scared me, my mom taught me to draw it. She said getting it out of your head and onto paper made it smaller." Stella sketched a simple box. "This is what I'm afraid of. Small spaces. Being trapped." Kai studied the drawing intently. Then he took a pencil and began to draw with surprising focus. Wolves emerged on his paper. 3 of them. One large, one medium, one small. Then he drew fire. Lots of fire. And a woman with long dark hair, separate from the wolves, surrounded by flames. Stella's throat tightened. "Your mother." Kai nodded, his small hand trembling slightly. "My parents died too," Stella said softly. "They were warriors. They died protecting the pack during a raid. I miss them every day." She looked at Kai's drawing. "But I think they'd want us to keep living, even when it's hard." Kai set down his pencil and leaned against her shoulder. It was the most trust he'd shown anyone. From his third-floor office window, Damon Blackwood watched them in the garden. His beta, Marcus, no relation to the Silver Moon monster, stood beside him reviewing territory reports. "The boy hasn't smiled in 2 years," Marcus observed. "Until her." Damon said nothing, but his jaw worked. Stella was still broken. She had panic attacks that left her gasping. She couldn't walk through doorways without checking for exits. She woke screaming most nights. And yet somehow his son was healing. "She's changing him," Marcus continued. "Changing this whole place, really. The staff actually hum while they work now." "She's human," Damon said flatly. "She's brave. There's a difference." That afternoon, Stella decided to explore the estate gardens more fully. Kai trotted beside her in wolf form as she admired the late-blooming roses. Then she saw it, a beautiful glass greenhouse, filled with exotic plants. "Oh, that's pretty. Let's look inside." She pulled open the door and stepped in. The air was immediately warmer, humid. The glass walls rose around her. And suddenly, horribly, the space contracted. Stone walls. Darkness. Can't breathe. Buried. Trapped. Dying. Stella's vision tunneled. Her chest seized. She spun toward the door, but her legs wouldn't work. She collapsed to her knees, gasping, clawing at her throat. Kai's howl split the air. Within seconds, 2 things happened. Kai shifted and grabbed her hand, and Damon crashed through the greenhouse door with supernatural speed. "Stella." Damon's voice cut through her panic. He dropped to his knees in front of her, his large hands cupping her face. "Look at me. You're not in the ground. You're here. With us. Can't breathe." "Yes, you can. Feel the air. Feel my hands. That's real. The greenhouse is not the crypt." Kai pressed against her other side, his small hand on her back. "Breathe with me," Damon commanded. "In. Out. In. Out." Slowly, agonizingly, her vision cleared. The greenhouse resolved around her, glass and light, not stone and darkness. "There," Damon said quietly. "You're here. You're safe." Stella realized she was gripping his forearms hard enough to bruise. I'm sorry. I thought I could. Don't apologize for surviving. His gray eyes held hers. Healing isn't linear. Some days will be harder than others. Kai wrapped his arms around her waist and didn't let go. And somehow, held between them, Stella felt a little less broken. Chapter 5. The Truth Beneath the Stars. The nightmares came again that night, worse than usual. Stella woke choking on phantom dirt, and even with the windows thrown wide open, the walls felt too close. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and slipped outside to the garden, where the sky stretched infinite overhead. The stars helped. They reminded her that the world was vast, that she wasn't trapped in a stone box beneath the earth. She settled on a bench near the fountain, listening to the water and trying to convince her racing heart that she was safe. Can't sleep either? Stella jumped, then relaxed when she saw Damon emerge from the shadows. He wore simple dark clothes, his hair loose around his shoulders. Without his usual commanding presence, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. The stars help, she said quietly. They remind me there's space, air, freedom. Damon sat beside her, leaving respectful distance between them. For a long moment, they just existed together in the silence. Luna was her name, he said finally. My mate. Kai's mother. Stella turned to look at him. Rogues attacked 3 years ago. A coordinated strike on the eastern border. She was visiting the outpost with Kai. His jaw clenched. I was in a council meeting. By the time I got there, she was already gone. And Kai. His voice cracked slightly. He watched them kill her. He screamed for help that didn't come fast enough. Damon, I couldn't protect her. I failed them both. And Kai's been trapped in his trauma ever since, just like you're trapped in yours. He looked at Stella, and she saw the weight of his guilt. He hasn't shifted willingly or spoken a word since that day. Until he found me, Stella whispered. Until he found you. Damon's expression was complex, gratitude mixed with something darker. He heard you when no one else could. Maybe because he knows what it's like to scream and not be heard, Stella said softly. When you're trapped in trauma, you recognize it in others. Even when no one else can see it. Damon studied her for a long moment. You should be broken. Anyone else would be. You were buried alive, Stella. You clawed at stone until your fingers bled. You suffocated in the dark. His voice dropped. You should be shattered. Instead, you're teaching my son to draw. You're fighting panic attacks and winning. You're not like other humans. Stella met his gaze steadily. I refuse to stay buried. Not again. Not ever. Marcus tried to silence me, to erase me, to make me disappear. But I'm still here. Still breathing. Still fighting. Her voice strengthened. That's all the power I need. Something shifted in the air between them. Recognition. Respect. Something more that neither was quite ready to name. Damon reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused, gentle despite his strength. You're under my protection now. Marcus will never touch you again. I swear it on my life. Why? Stella asked. Why do you care what happens to a human girl with no pack, no wolf, no value? Because you saved my son. Damon's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Because you're braver than most wolves I know. And because. He paused, his gray eyes intense in the starlight. Because someone should have protected you long before I found you in that grave. Stella's breath caught. The way he looked at her made something warm unfurl in her chest, something that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the connection forming between two people who understood what it meant to survive the unsurvivable. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I have a feeling you're going to be more trouble than you're worth." "Definitely." Stella smiled back, and for the first time since the burial, it felt genuine. They sat together beneath the stars, hands intertwined, two broken people finding strength in shared understanding. The night was vast above them, full of air and light and possibility. And for once, neither of them felt quite so alone. Chapter 6: The Blood Moon Summit. Beta Marcus burst into the library where Stella was reading with Kai, his face grave. "Alpha, we received the summons. The Blood Moon Summit is in 3 days. Attendance is mandatory." Damon looked up from the reports he'd been reviewing. "I know. All major packs will attend." Marcus's eyes flicked to Stella meaningfully. "Including Silvermoon." The book slipped from Stella's hands. Her heart stopped, then started hammering so hard she felt dizzy. Marcus. Alpha Marcus would be there. The man who buried her alive. Who sealed her in darkness and walked away. "Stella." Damon was beside her instantly. "Breathe. He'll be there," she whispered. "He thinks I'm dead. If he sees me." "You don't have to go," Damon said firmly. "You can stay here. The estate is protected. You'll be safe." Stella's hands shook. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to stay buried in the safety Damon offered. But that's what Marcus wanted, wasn't it? For her to disappear. To be erased. To stay silent and forgotten. "No." The word came out stronger than she expected. "I'm tired of hiding. I'm tired of being buried." She looked up at Damon, her emerald eyes blazing. "I want him to see that I'm alive." That he failed. Damon's expression shifted, a dangerous smile touching his lips. "Then you'll go as my honored guest. Let the bastard see what he threw away." The morning of the summit, Elena arrived with a garment bag. Inside was a gown that stole Stella's breath, emerald silk that matched her eyes exactly, with a fitted bodice and flowing skirt. The neckline was elegant, the back open, and most importantly, the sleeves were short. Her scars would show. The mangled fingers that had clawed at stone. The evidence of her burial. "Perfect," Stella said quietly. At the Grand Hall, every pack leader on the continent had gathered under the massive crystal chandeliers. The air hummed with power and politics. Damon entered with Stella on his arm, and the room went still. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Who is she? She has no scent. Is she human? Why is the Alpha King with a human? Look at her hands. What happened to her?" Stella kept her head high, her scarred fingers resting on Damon's arm. She wore her trauma like armor, visible and undeniable. Damon's hand settled possessively on her waist, a clear message to anyone watching. She was under his protection. They moved through the crowd, and Stella felt the weight of hundreds of eyes. But she didn't shrink, didn't hide. She met their stares with quiet defiance. Then she felt it. A gaze that burned differently than the others. Heavy with shock and something darker. Across the hall, standing with a group of Silvermoon wolves, Alpha Marcus froze mid-conversation. His champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. His face went white as death. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Stella watched the impossible dawn on his features. Recognition. Horror. Disbelief. She was supposed to be dead. Buried. Gone. Forgotten. But there she stood, alive and defiant, on the arm of the most powerful alpha on the continent. Marcus's shock turned to rage in an instant. His hands clenched into fists. His companion, a she-wolf with auburn hair, touched his arm in concern, but he shook her off violently. Damon felt Stella tense. "Steady," he murmured. "You're not in the ground anymore. You're standing in the light. And he can't touch you here." Stella's scarred fingers tightened on his arm. "He's coming over." "Good." Damon's smile was all predator. "Let him." Across the hall, Marcus began pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. The confrontation was about to begin. Chapter 7. The Ghost Speaks. Marcus shoved through the final cluster of wolves, his new mate Victoria scrambling to keep up. He stopped 3 feet from Stella, staring at her like she was an apparition. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're dead. I buried you myself." Stella's hands trembled, but her voice came out steady. "You tried. But graves don't hold the unwilling." Marcus's shock crystallized into rage. "You're property of Silvermoon Pack. A runaway. I demand her immediate return for proper punishment." Damon stepped forward, placing himself partially between them. The temperature in the immediate area seemed to drop. "She's under my protection. You buried her. By pack law, you declared her dead. The dead have no pack, Marcus. She knows our secrets. She's a security risk." Marcus's voice rose, drawing more attention. "She's mine." Something inside Stella snapped. All the fear, all the nights waking up suffocating, all the hours of clawing her way back to sanity, it crystallized into fury. "I was never yours," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent hall. "I will never be yours. And everyone here will know what you did." She stepped forward, pulling away from Damon's protective presence. She held up her hands, palms out, displaying the mangled scars where her fingernails had been torn away. "He buried me alive because I refused his claim," she announced, her voice ringing with truth. "Look at my fingers. I tore them bloody trying to claw through stone. I screamed until my voice broke. I suffocated in the dark while he walked away." The hall erupted in whispers. Several alphas exchanged disgusted looks. Even Victoria stepped back from Marcus, her face pale. "She's lying," Marcus snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then explain the scars," Damon said coldly. "Explain how she ended up buried in a crypt in the Whispering Woods. Explain why my son heard her dying screams from miles away." An elder alpha from the Western Territories spoke up. "Live burial is forbidden by the old laws. It's considered torture, not execution." Marcus's face flushed dark red. He was losing control of the narrative, being judged by his peers. "This isn't over," he hissed at Stella, his eyes promising violence. "You should have stayed dead." He turned and stormed toward the exit, Victoria and his wolves hurrying after him. But before he left, he looked back once. The promise in his eyes was clear. He would finish what he started. Stella watched him go, her heart pounding, but her head high. She'd done it. She'd spoken her truth in front of the most powerful wolves on the continent, and they'd believed her. Damon's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "You were magnificent." "I was terrified," she admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's speaking anyway." He guided her toward a quieter corner. "But he'll come for you now. You humiliated him publicly." "I know." Stella met his eyes. "Let him come." Chapter 8. The Raid. Back at the Nightshade estate, Stella tucked Kai into bed, smoothing his dark hair back from his forehead. He'd stayed in human form all evening, still riding the high of her public confrontation with Marcus. "One more story?" he asked hopefully. His voice was still soft, uncertain, but growing stronger each day. "One more," Stella agreed, settling beside him with a worn book of fairy tales. She'd just started reading about a brave knight when the alarm split the night. It wasn't a simple warning bell. It was a howl, primal, urgent, terrifying. Perimeter breach. Damon burst through the door seconds later, already half-shifted, his eyes blazing gold. Marcus brought mercenaries. Rogues. He's launching a full assault. Stella's blood turned to ice. "He's coming for me." "Yes." Damon pulled Kai from the bed. "Safe room. Now." They ran through the corridors. Staff members rushed past, heading to defensive positions. The sounds of battle erupted from the perimeter, snarls, screams, the crack of gunfire. Damon threw open the reinforced safe room door. It was small, windowless, lined with steel. Stella froze at the threshold. Her vision tunneled. Stone walls. Darkness. "Can't breathe." "I can't." She backed away, hyperventilating. "I can't go in there." Damon cursed. Outside, an explosion rocked the estate. "Then stay in Kai's room. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but me." "Understand. But I need to lead the defense." "Please, Stella. Keep him safe." She nodded, taking Kai's trembling hand. They ran back to his room. Stella locked the door, shoved a dresser against it, and pulled Kai into the corner farthest from any entrance. The battle raged outside. Stella held Kai close, covering his ears when the sounds grew too violent. Screams. Breaking glass. The wet sound of claws tearing through flesh. Then silence. Horrible, waiting silence. A window shattered in the hallway. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. The door to Kai's room exploded inward. Marcus stood in the doorway, covered in blood, holding a silver blade that gleamed in the moonlight. Behind him, the hallway was dark. "You should have stayed buried, Stella." She pushed Kai behind her, standing between him and Marcus. "Get out. I've killed 4 of Damon's wolves getting in here. What's 2 more deaths?" Marcus advanced slowly. "First you. Then the Alpha King's pup. No witnesses. No one to contradict my story." Kai trembled against Stella's back, his small hands clutching her shirt. "You're insane," Stella said, her eyes scanning for weapons. "Killing a child? The Pax will. The Pax will believe whatever I tell them." A tragic raid. Casualties on both sides. Marcus's smile was vicious. "And you? You were never really alive, were you? Just a ghost I failed to bury properly." He lunged. Stella grabbed the heavy metal bookend from Kai's nightstand and swung with everything she had. It connected with Marcus's temple. He staggered, blood streaming down his face. "You bitch." His backhand sent her flying. She crashed into the wall, stars exploding across her vision. The metallic taste of blood filled her mouth. Marcus wiped blood from his eyes and turned to Kai, who stood frozen in the corner, too terrified to shift, to run, to do anything. Nothing personal, kid. Marcus raised the silver blade. But your father took what was mine. No. Stella threw herself forward, but she was too slow, too far away. The blade descended toward Kai's chest. First the brat, Marcus snarled. Then you back in the ground where you belong. Chapter 9. The Shift. Stella threw herself over Kai, shielding his small body with hers. No, not him. The blade descended. Something inside Kai shattered. Not broke. Transformed. Raw fury exploded through his small frame. 3 years of silence, of trapped grief, of watching his mother die, it all erupted at once. His body convulsed, bones cracking and reforming faster than ever before. He wasn't shifting into a pup. He was becoming a juvenile wolf, larger than any 6-year-old should manage, his black fur bristling with rage. Kai launched himself at Marcus with a snarl that sounded ancient. His jaws clamped onto Marcus's sword arm. The blade clattered away. What the Marcus threw Kai off, but it gave Stella precious seconds to grab the boy and roll away. Marcus cornered them again, murder in his eyes. Say goodbye, Stella. The exterior wall exploded inward in a shower of stone and timber. Damon arrived in full alpha form, massive, terrifying, unstoppable. He didn't shift, didn't speak, just tore into Marcus with the fury of a father protecting his family. Stella crawled to Kai, who'd shifted back to human, sobbing. My mama, Kai cried, his voice hoarse but clear. He hurt my mama. Damon froze mid-strike, staring at his son in shock. I'm okay, baby. Stella pulled Kai close. You were so brave. Damon's eyes blazed gold. He turned back to Marcus and finished it, brutal, final, deserved. Then he shifted to human form and collapsed beside them, pulling both Stella and Kai into his arms. He spoke. Damon's voice broke. You're both safe. You're both alive. In the ruins of the room, covered in blood and debris, they held each other. A family forged in fire. Chapter 10. The Luna Who Rose from the Grave. Days later, Stella sat in the garden with Kai, who hadn't stopped talking since finding his voice. He chattered about everything, the clouds, the birds, his drawings, what he wanted for breakfast tomorrow. Making up for 3 years of silence in a single week. And then I'll learn to shift better, and Dad says maybe I can have a puppy. Not like me puppy, but an actual puppy, and Kai stopped mid-sentence as Damon approached with Beta Marcus and the Pack Council. Stella's stomach tightened. Official visits were never casual. The Silver Moon Pack has been disbanded, Damon announced. Marcus's crimes were brought before the Interpack Council. His death was ruled lawful justice in defense of family. Relief flooded through her. It was truly over. Council Elder Miriam stepped forward. Alpha Damon, the pack is asking about the human. Rumors are spreading. They want to know her place here. Damon's expression shifted, something softer breaking through his usual stoic mask. Then let's end the rumors. He knelt before Stella, producing a ring of black diamond that caught the sunlight like captured starlight. You were buried, but you refused to stay dead, Damon said, his voice carrying to the assembled council. You brought my son back from the darkness. You brought me back from the edge. His gray eyes held hers. Stella Hayes, will you rise with me? Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as my Luna, my mate, my equal. Tears streamed down Stella's face. I spent so long in the darkness. You brought me into the light. Yes, always yes. The coronation was held 3 days later under the open sky, Stella's one requirement. Never confined. Never trapped. She stood before the assembled pack in a gown of silver that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Damon beside her in formal black. Kai holding her hand, refusing to let go. I have no wolf, Stella addressed them, her voice steady. I have no supernatural power. But I have something stronger. I refuse to die. And I will fight with everything I have to protect this pack, this family. That is my vow. The pack erupted in howls of acceptance. The human Luna who conquered death itself. That night, Stella stood in the garden looking up at the infinite stars. She remembered the suffocating darkness of the grave, the terror, the certainty of death. But she'd clawed her way out. She'd survived. She'd risen. And now, finally, she was free. And that is the extraordinary story of Stella and Damon. It's a powerful reminder that survival itself is a superpower. Stella was buried alive, silenced, erased, but she refused to stay in the darkness. She clawed her way out, not just physically, but emotionally. And in doing so, she didn't just save herself, she saved a broken family. Your trauma doesn't define you. Your refusal to let it bury you does. Remember, you are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after.